Hey guys, tonight we're waking up somewhere loud, sunlit, and slightly unwashed. The air is dry, the floors are hard-packed clay, and instead of your phone alarm, what you hear is the barked command of someone standing over your pallet. He's not your roommate. He owns you. Because surprise, you're not a noble Athenian citizen in this story. You're a doulos, a slave. And it's not even your worst day yet. You've been assigned to a moderately wealthy household in Athens, maybe the home of a stonemason or a minor politician. Your job? Whatever they say. Cleaning olive pits off the floor, refilling amphorae, maybe even helping in the workshop if you're lucky. But this morning, they just want you on your feet. The master's wife wants to sweep the room, and your body's in the way. You roll off the mat, bones creaking from another sleep on straw too thin and bugs too thick. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're tuning in from and what time it is over there. I love seeing our little ancient history club pop up from all over the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The day begins without toothpaste or privacy. You splash a little water from a terracotta basin, cold and metallic on your skin, but don't expect soap. The Greeks weren't huge fans of it yet. Instead, you scrub your face with rough linen and a little ash if you're lucky. You catch your reflection in the water and notice. You're sunburned already, even though it's barely spring. Welcome to working outdoors in a land that thinks hats are optional. Your fellow slaves are already busy. One is lighting the kitchen hearth with flint and kindling. Another is feeding the house's 3 goats, and here you are, shuffling behind them, hoping the master doesn't feel like punishing anyone today. Because while some households were fair, let's just say fair in ancient Greece included whipping, branding, and sometimes, if you tried to escape, execution. Historians still argue whether all Greek city-states treated slaves equally harshly. In Sparta, for instance, slaves called helots were so brutally oppressed that young Spartan warriors trained by murdering them in secret. But even in artsy, democratic Athens, your legal status is somewhere between farm tool and speaking dog. You glance at the master's son, a smug 14-year-old who's already learning rhetoric and geometry, while you're still figuring out how not to drop the bronze wine jug. If you speak out of turn, or worse, speak to a citizen, expect a cuff across the face. Greek society might have invented democracy, but it didn't extend to you, or to women, or to anyone born outside a very narrow slice of land and privilege. You shuffle toward the courtyard where the master is already calling for his sandals. He stretches, yawns, and greets the sun like a smug cat. You hand him the shoes. He grunts in thanks. Doesn't look at you. Doesn't need to. And this is the part where your hopes crumble. You'd thought, maybe, that you were going to learn philosophy today. Maybe peek at one of those scrolls or listen in on some epic poetry. But no. Your orders are to follow him to the Agora, the marketplace, and carry his wares. That means hefting heavy pots, dodging shouting vendors, and trying not to look anyone in the eye. You are, legally, invisible. Unless you screw up. There's a moment of relief when you pass a temple. its columns glowing in the morning sun. Maybe you offer a tiny prayer to Hermes or Athena, out of habit, out of fear, or just because everyone else is doing it. The gods are everywhere here, engraved into the city's skin, but they don't help you much. If you're lucky, they'll ignore you. If not, well, let's just say plague, famine, and war are all considered divine corrections to human arrogance. You pause at a shaded well. A few other slaves are waiting their turn, eyes downcast, shoulders tight. One whispers that their owner died last week in a duel, and they're being auctioned off tomorrow. You don't say a word, you just nod. Because nothing says fragile employment like being a living possession. And yet, even among the suffering, there's routine. You start to understand the rhythms, how to avoid the worst temper tantrums, how to predict your master's needs before he opens his mouth. You even learn the small kindnesses, like which baker will slip you a crust of bread if you sweep up afterward, or which temple priest doesn't mind if you sneak a quick nap behind the incense altar. But then, just as you're starting to hope the day will coast by, someone trips. Not you, thank the gods, but the house steward. He spills oil across the tiles, slips, and breaks a pot. The master turns red. Someone has to be punished, and you're the closest body. It's not a fair world, and no one's pretending otherwise. Pain is part of the operating system. You flinch, brace, and take the strike across your back. Not fatal, not even deep, but it leaves a red welt that stings with every step you take. That's your morning so far. Just imagine what lunch is going to look like. You're starving. That's not poetic exaggeration. You're actually lightheaded, half from the sun and half from the fact that breakfast in ancient Greece is more like a gesture, a whisper of a meal. You trudge back into the household's main room, hoping for something hearty, something warm, something vaguely recognizable. Instead, someone tosses you a lump of barley porridge, cold, sticky, and so bland it might actually subtract flavor from your mouth. You sit on a stool near the hearth and chew slowly, trying not to think about modern cereal, or eggs, or anything that doesn't taste like a damp napkin. The barley paste, called maza, was the go-to breakfast for most folks, even citizens. It's made of ground barley soaked in water or wine, pressed into a little cake, and sometimes, if you're very lucky, seasoned with herbs or bits of cheese. Today, no such luck. The mistress of the house is already eating fruit, olives, a little honey on bread. While you hover near the edges, careful not to inhale too loudly, you steal a sip of oinos, the diluted wine everyone drinks because the water isn't exactly clean. Don't get excited. It's about as boozy as cough syrup and slightly more vinegary, but it keeps dysentery at bay, mostly. Just when you think the food situation can't get worse, a guest arrives. Some family friend or minor official, draped in expensive wool, striding in like he owns the limestone floor. You jump up and begin clearing space, and here's where it gets complicated. Dining in ancient Greece is not just about eating, it's a social performance. You're expected to know who sits where, who gets the biggest olives, who needs their cushion fluffed just so. Serve wine too cold? You're scolded. Spill a drop on someone's hymation? You're done. Worse still, the guest starts going on about sophrosin, the Greek idea of self-control and modesty while you're literally wiping cheese crumbs off his toes. He talks philosophy while belching grape skins. You nod along, trying not to visibly question whether hypocrisy is also a virtue. Historians still argue whether this strict formality around meals reflected a broader cultural obsession with control, or if it was just a fancy way to police social ranks. Either way, you're not climbing any ladders. You're just trying to remember which clay cup belongs to which unwashed aristocrat. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, a very different vibe brews. The cook, a woman who might actually outrank you, whispers that someone's planning a religious offering later. You perk up, not because you're suddenly spiritual, but because religious festivals usually mean more food scraps. Honey cakes, figs, grilled meat if the gods are feeling generous. Of course, you won't participate in the ritual. That's reserved for citizens and their chosen favorites. You'll carry the basket, clean the ash, and if nobody's watching, maybe lick a honey smear off your fingers. You help carry the offering platter, a ceramic dish stacked with fish heads, small loaves, and a very dead bird. It's going to be burned at the altar in the courtyard, smoke rising into the sky like a spiritual Uber to Mount Olympus. The mistress chants a short prayer, and someone throws in a sprig of myrtle. You feel a brief, irrational guilt. Did you blink too loudly during the offering? Will Zeus smite you for impure thoughts? You look up, no lightning yet. Small victories. After the ritual, there's another rush to prepare for the midday meal. Lunch in ancient Greece is informal, usually just bread, olives, maybe some dried figs or cheese. But again, you're not eating with them. You're eating the leftovers, if anything. You wait in the shadows until the family finishes their meal. Then you scoop what's left off the wooden trays, crusts, olive pits, maybe a sad corner of feta. The goats get better service, and then comes the judgment. You'd think a house with no forks, no napkins, and a questionable relationship with hygiene wouldn't be too picky. But ancient Greeks had opinions. Eat too fast, you're uncivilized. Use the wrong hand, you're suspicious. Wipe your mouth on your sleeve, just go live with the Persians already. You try to stay invisible, but they notice. The guest actually comments on your posture, says you slouch like a Scythian. You don't even know what that means, but it's probably not a compliment. Another joke floats your way about how slaves should be grateful they're not chained up in the silver mines. You smile politely and clench your teeth. By the time the guest leaves, the sun is high and hot, and your stomach is still rumbling. But now it's time to prep for the master's bath. That'll be your next chore. Boiling water, hauling it in buckets, and scrubbing down your owner with olive oil and a blunt scraper. That's right, he gets pampered. You, on the other hand, you're just hoping for a splash of lukewarm rinse at the end. And remember, there's no break room, no lunch hour, no HR department where you can quietly report the guy who threw an olive pit at your forehead. There's just the long, dusty afternoon ahead. With luck, you might get assigned to the market again. With less luck, maybe the latrines. Either way, the barley mush still clings to the roof of your mouth like a bad decision. Still hungry? Too bad. There's a war coming, and you'll be the one carrying the shields. So, about that bath, you'd think after lugging heavy amphorae, dodging insults, and eating barley paste like a medieval smoothie, you'd at least get a nice soak. Something relaxing, maybe with rose petals and a flute player. But no, ancient Greek hygiene is a mix of high-minded ideals and low-effort scrubbing, and it starts with oil, lots of it. You enter the Balnean, the public bathhouse, or maybe it's the smaller private setup behind the master's courtyard, depending on his wealth and mood. Either way, you're not here as a guest, you're here as staff. You haul the bronze cauldrons of water over open flames, stirring them with a paddle the size of your arm. It's hotter than Hades back here. Your tunic sticks to your skin, and the air smells like a stew of ash, sweat, and old olives. Greek bathing isn't soap and rinse. It's oil and scrape. The bather, usually your master or one of his grumpy sons, starts by rubbing himself down with olive oil. Then, you take a metal tool called a strigil, and you scrape it all off, dragging away dirt, dead skin, and whatever regrets the day has coated him in. You are now both custodian and exfoliator, and he talks while you do it, about politics, about Homer, about how the Spartans probably smell like goats. You nod and murmur in agreement, even though you're busy trying not to gag. One little known fact: some Greeks believed sweating out toxins was the true path to cleanliness, which means they saw bathing as optional. You, unfortunately, are living proof of the results. Historians still argue whether the average Greek truly bathed daily or just when they remembered. Some evidence points to regular routines, especially in city centers. Others suggest it was more of a social occasion, cleanliness optional, gossip mandatory. But one thing's clear: olive oil is expensive, and you're not wasting it on yourself. Later, once the citizens are clean, you're allowed a rinse. Not oil, mind you. Just leftover water. Maybe a dip from the communal basin if you're quick and nobody's watching. You strip off your tunic, step into the corner, and use your hands like a sad sponge. There are no soaps, no towels. You pat yourself with an old cloth and pray to Apollo your rash doesn't get worse. The floor is slick with oil drips and muddy footprints. Someone, an old philosopher maybe, slips, mutters about fate, and stumbles back upright like it's all part of some grand cosmic metaphor. You don't laugh. You've learned better. You move to the gymnasium, because of course the master wants his muscles touched up after bathing. This is less fitness and more showboating. You rub his arms with fresh oil, maybe throw in a light massage, though your hands ache from earlier labor. Meanwhile, men nearby are wrestling, naked. That's right, wrestling, nude, covered in oil. If this feels strange, it should. But here, it's all about virtue and discipline. Supposedly, the Greeks believed that training the body trained the soul. But you're not seeing much soul training. You're mostly just trying not to get elbowed in the face by a shiny, shouting man named Nicandros. By this point, your body stinks of smoke, and your hands are shiny with second-hand oil. You head back toward the house just as the sun dips past the Acropolis. Someone hands you a rag and says the latrines need scrubbing. You've barely dried off, and now you're sprinting into a room that smells like 12 goats ate something wrong. Ancient plumbing? Let's be honest, there's none. Toilets are stone benches with holes. Waste runs into a shallow channel, occasionally rinsed with rainwater if the gods are kind. No toilet paper, of course, just a communal sponge on a stick, or a clay shard if you're unlucky. You don't use them. You clean them, slowly, thoroughly, wishing you could unlive this part of the day. While you're crouched with a brush that looks like it's made from old hair, a boy wanders in and says something about Asclepios, the healing god. You look up. He's offering you a coin. For your prayers, he says. You nod blankly. Did he just mistake you for a temple servant? You'll take it. This brings you to a quiet moment in the back courtyard. Evening is coming. A flute drifts in from a neighbor's window. The shadows get longer, softer, and for the first time today, you sit on actual stone. You stretch your legs, crack your back, and breathe in a breeze that doesn't smell like goats or vinegar. You savor it. You watch a neighbor sweeping their doorway. Kids run by with wooden toys. Somewhere, a lyre is playing. It's beautiful, until your master yells from inside for more wine. You're up again, rushing, praying your arms don't shake when you pour. He's hosting a symposion tonight, which means you'll be serving. You don't eat, you don't talk, you just pour and fetch, and watch grown men get drunk and argue about whether Homer was blind or merely symbolically sightless. Someone tries to grope the lyre player. Someone else vomits in a potted fig tree. You mop that up too. You're oily, tired, underfed, and no closer to understanding why olive oil apparently fixes everything. Maybe you'll dream about it later, if you ever get to sleep. The sun has barely set when the shouting starts. Not drunken party shouting, not yet. This is political shouting. Loud, fast, competitive, and strangely musical in rhythm. You squint through the shadows and realize you're being pulled, along with the master and a few of his friends, toward the ecclesia, the Athenian assembly. You're not going to speak, of course. You're going to stand at the edges, holding scrolls, sandals, or maybe just the occasional runaway dog. You enter the Pnyx, the hilltop meeting place where thousands of free citizens gather. And the noise hits you like a chariot. It's a roar of overlapping debates, jeers, cheers, and angry speeches about taxes, alliances, and whether the Spartans smell bad enough to warrant war. There's no microphone. There's just a stone platform called the bema, and whoever's bold enough to clamber up and yell first. Welcome to Athenian democracy. It's loud, it's chaotic, and it's absolutely not for you. Because you're not a land-owning male citizen over the age of 18, so you don't get a vote, or a say, or even a cushion. You're legally less than a teenager's pet dog in this situation. Your role is to stand nearby, hold things, and keep your eyes down. Now, to be fair, the Greeks were incredibly proud of this whole democracy thing. It was revolutionary. A radical idea where ordinary men could make laws, elect leaders, and ostracize people they didn't like. Literally. They'd vote on scraps of pottery called ostraka, and if your name came up too often, you were booted from the city for 10 years. No debate, just gone. Honestly, social media could never. Historians still argue whether the democracy was truly democratic, considering the whole slaves, women, and foreigners excluded issue. Some claim it laid the foundation for all future republics. Others suggest it was more of a chaotic shouting match between rich men with beards. Either way, it was noisy and stressful. And you, holding your master's scrolls while he yells about grain taxes, are stuck here for hours. At one point, a speaker demands that Athens build more triremes, fast, sleek warships with a reputation for splitting enemies clean in two. The crowd roars approval. You shiver, because building more ships means more war, and war means conscription, and you may not be a citizen, but you're still strong, and they will find a use for you, rowing, loading, burying the dead. You shift your weight as the stone under your feet grows cold. A man beside you spits, wipes his hands on his tunic, and mutters something about those Corinthian cowards. You keep nodding like you agree, because disagreeing, even with a tone or twitch of the eyebrow, can get you punished, or worse, mistaken for a sympathizer of the wrong city-state. You've now been standing here for hours. The stars are up. The arguments still haven't stopped. The voting has started. Hands raised, pottery shards scratched, voices chanting aye or nay. It's strangely theatrical, like a sports match with more insults and fewer rules. You catch a few words. Tribute, Persia, grain, honor. Someone says Platia, and people groan. That battle was decades ago, but nobody in Athens forgets a grudge. Eventually, the crowd begins to thin. Some citizens head home, others head to the tavern. Your master and his circle drift toward the latter, of course. You follow, carrying a small oil lamp to light the way. Your legs ache. Your head rings, and your stomach still growls from that barley lump 11 hours ago. At the tavern, things get lively. You're not supposed to be here. Slaves and foreigners technically aren't allowed to linger in public drinking houses, but if you're pouring wine or sweeping up, nobody blinks. So, you stand by the door and try not to breathe too obviously while the men argue over who won tonight's debate. Spoiler alert, they all think they did. You overhear a man bragging about throwing a radish at a rival speaker's head. Another complains that his ostraca vote didn't count because he scratched the name Aristophanes, but didn't spell it correctly. You consider asking for clarification, but then you remember. Silence is your safest option. And yet, despite the filth and noise and endless errands, there's something strange in the air tonight. Something you can't quite name. Maybe it's the scent of grilled fish wafting in from the kitchen. Maybe it's the glow of the oil lamps on everyone's faces. Maybe it's just delirium from standing too long. But for a second, this feels almost human. Like you're not so different from them. Like if you could just climb onto the bema and say something clever, you'd belong too. Then someone drops a wine jug, and you're back in your role. You mop it up. You nod when you're told to. And when it's finally time to leave, you trail behind your master down a narrow stone street, feet sore, eyes stinging. The democracy goes to sleep, but your day isn't over. Not yet. The streets of Athens are quiet now, but not peaceful. Not the kind of quiet where crickets chirp and stars twinkle over a sleepy town. This is the tense, crouching kind of silence, like the city is holding its breath. You follow your master home, oil lamp flickering in your hand, and past shadows that move too fast to be wind. Thieves, drunkards, ghosts. You don't look long enough to find out. Back at the house, you're ordered to set out fresh incense in the household shrine, the lararium, and offer a silent thanks to the gods. All of them. Because you never know which one's feeling testy. And ancient Greece is nothing if not crowded on the divine front. You think Christianity has a complex cast? Try managing an entire divine pantheon where one god is in charge of love, another of war, another of wine, and several are just sort of ambient forces of chaos. You fumble with a small clay lamp and a pinch of myrrh. Smoke curls upward, curling into the rafters. You mutter something under your breath to Athena, goddess of wisdom, and the one with the fewest personal vendettas, hopefully. Your master grunts in approval, then stumbles off to bed. But you're not done. You've been assigned to temple duty tomorrow, and that means rising before dawn to prepare offerings at one of Athens' many sacred sites. You lie down in the corner of the house on a thin mat you've rolled out on stone and try to fall asleep. But here's the problem with gods. They demand a lot. Morning comes. You rise with it. No alarm clock, just the sound of roosters and your own panic at sleeping too long. You trudge to the temple of Hephaestus, the god of fire and craftsmen. It's uphill, always uphill. Your hands are full, small amphorae of oil, dried herbs, strips of linen. The temple priest greets you with the warmness of an expired fish. You're not a worshiper here. You're staff. Your job is to clean the altar, arrange the offerings, and avoid doing anything that could be construed as impure. And in ancient Greek religious practice, impure can mean anything. Did you step in dog droppings? Impure. Did you think a sinful thought while lighting the incense? Impure. Are you foreign-born? Impure forever. Congratulations. You sweep the marble floor, brushing off bits of ash and burnt goat hair from the last sacrifice. The smell is intense. Roasted meat, smoldering fat, and the faint echo of blood that no amount of scrubbing ever fully removes. Your nose wrinkles, but you keep going. Then comes the animal. Today it's a sheep, docile and oblivious, dragged forward by two men in ceremonial tunics. You're not the butcher, thank the gods, but you do have to help hold the amphora steady as they pour the libation. Wine spills over the sheep's head. The prayer is recited. The blade flashes. You look away. Historians still argue whether these sacrifices were truly common or more occasional spectacles. Some temples performed daily rites, while others saved slaughter for festivals. But you're knee-deep in it now, literally. You're given a rag and told to mop the edges of the altar. You do, nose full of copper and smoke, stomach flipping like a badly trimmed sail. You'd like to think the gods appreciate your effort, but the statues just stare, cold, painted marble with blank, judging eyes. Did Apollo just frown? Did Artemis see you flinch? You try not to breathe too loudly. Then the fleas come. Temples aren't spotless. They're crowded, smelly, and teeming with animals and humans alike. You scratch your leg and realize something is hopping and biting. Fleas? Lice? Both? Great. The gods might smite you, but the bugs will definitely find you first. And as if divine judgment and parasites weren't enough, the priest starts quizzing you. Not with actual questions. He's just muttering aloud about omens and divine messages, and how last night's smoke curled in the wrong direction. You nod as if you know what he means. Apparently, the gods communicate via bird guts, fire patterns, and the occasional dream. You're not sure what the dream you had last night, involving a giant barley cake chasing you, means, but it's probably not divine. A young girl comes in to leave an offering of grapes and a small bronze charm. She smiles at you. You blink. A rare moment of kindness in a day full of burnt offerings and bleeding sheep. Maybe not all Athenians are cruel, maybe just most. By midday, you're dismissed. You shuffle back down to the city, reeking of smoke and sanctified liver. And just when you think you'll finally get some rest, someone stops you. A stern older man with a ceremonial wreath and a sour face. He asks if you performed the incense ritual properly. You hesitate. Wrong move. He berates you for 5 full minutes. Something about defiling sacred space with clumsy foreign hands. You apologize. He doesn't care. You walk away. He calls you a barley-chewing dog. You don't turn around. By the time you get back to the house, your limbs are shaking. Your hands are stained. You have an offering blister on your thumb. You lie down, hoping for sleep. But instead, your mind is spinning with questions. Are the gods even listening? Does Hephaestus care if you spilled the wine jug? Will Artemis forgive you for stepping on a beetle? You sigh, close your eyes, and dream of being a cucumber, just lying in a garden, ignored, uneaten. It's the closest to peace you've had in days. You wake to shouting. Again. But this time, it's not your master, not the priest, not even a market vendor yelling about stolen figs. It's a man in a chiton standing in the street, flailing his arms and hollering about logos and the immortal soul. He's either drunk or a philosopher. And in ancient Athens, those two categories often overlap. You roll off your mat, knees cracking like old roof tiles. Another day. Another chance to accidentally offend someone with too much leisure time and not enough hygiene. You get dressed, tie your belt, and brace for impact. Because today, you're headed toward the Stoa, the public colonnade where the philosophers gather. And guess what? You're not just passing by. You're running errands for your master's cousin, who fancies himself a disciple of Socrates. He's invited you along to carry the scrolls and expand your mind. You'd prefer just the scrolls, honestly. The Stoa Poikile is buzzing. Bearded men in various stages of robe disarray are lounging against columns, arguing passionately about things like justice, the soul, and whether beings have consciousness. Yes, really. One sect, Pythagoreans, won't even touch beans because they believe the souls of the dead might be in them. You make a mental note. Avoid hummus forever. Your master's cousin, Callimachus, grabs you by the elbow and drags you into the middle of a heated debate. A Stoic is ranting about virtue. A Cynic, smelling faintly of onions, interrupts to say all possessions are chains. A third man, shirtless and sitting on a rock, just wants to know if the sun is really the sun or just an illusion. You're trying to keep quiet, hold the scrolls, and not nod at the wrong moment when Callimachus suddenly turns to you. Tell us, what is justice? Wait, what? You blink. Your brain, full of barley and smoke residue, tries to catch up. You want to say something smart, something vague, maybe just repeat what someone else said but softer. Instead, you stammer, justice is when people get what they deserve. There's a pause. The Cynic snorts. The Stoic nods like he's trying to be polite. And Callimachus, your so-called sponsor, smacks you lightly on the back of the head and says, "Too simplistic." You're dismissed, not just from the conversation, from the entire idea of having thoughts. Historians still argue whether these public debates were inclusive forums of democratic exchange or exclusive intellectual clubs for well-off Athenian men. What's clear is, you, a slave or servant with no formal education, are not welcome to engage too deeply. You're here to listen, not participate, unless they need someone to point at when making a hypothetical. You slink back toward the shade, pretending to fix your sandal strap. Someone hands you a fig. Small mercy. You chew quietly as the philosophers resume their shouting match about whether pleasure is the highest good or just a passing distraction. One man swears by Epicurus, another hurls an olive pit at him and accuses him of hedonistic treason. You try to stay neutral, which, in Athens, is nearly impossible. Later, Callimachus wants to visit the academy, Plato's famous school outside the city walls. You walk behind him, trying to keep your tunic clean while stepping around donkey dung and stray dogs. The academy is peaceful at least. Gardens, shady trees, and more men in deep discussion. Here, philosophy feels more like soft-spoken riddles than passionate yelling. Someone is drawing geometric figures in the dirt with a stick. A student argues that the material world is just a shadow of true reality. Another draws a triangle and declares it proof of cosmic harmony. You're impressed until you realize no one here can agree on whether your body is a prison for your soul or just a temporary meat vessel to be transcended. Either way, you don't seem to be invited to transcend anything. Your head spins, not just from ideas, but from dehydration. All this walking, standing, nodding, and no water. You duck behind a pillar and splash your face with what turns out to be ceremonial hand-washing water. A small boy gasps. You apologize. Too late. Someone complains about impure hands touching sacred vessels. You're ushered out. As you walk back to town, you pass another group of thinkers debating fate. One insists everything is predetermined. Another claims free will is divine. A third shrugs and says, life is just atoms bumping around like drunk bees. You, meanwhile, just want a nap. Back at the house, Callimachus pats your shoulder like a disappointed tutor. You'll get there, he says, eventually. You nod, then scrub the courtyard tiles for 2 hours. No discussion required. Later, while you're emptying the waste jar from the upper room, you hear your master repeating something you said earlier. Your comment about justice. He's retelling it at dinner like it was his own thought. The guests nod. One calls it profound. You feel a twitch of pride, then a slap of reality. You're still the one carrying the jar. Just when you think your day can't get weirder, the war drums begin. Okay, not actual drums, but the thud of sandals on stone as armored men march past your street is just as loud. The polis is buzzing again. A rumor's spreading fast. A Spartan envoy has insulted an Athenian general, or maybe a merchant, or maybe a goat. Nobody agrees on the details, but everyone agrees it's a deep offense, which, in Athens, means very public outrage. Your master is rushing around, shouting for his spear and sandals like he's going to single-handedly repel Sparta with his opinions. You get handed a bundle, shields, supplies, maybe even extra sandals, and told to follow him to the Agora, where a heated meeting is already in full swing. And just like that, you're swept back into the boiling pot of public Athenian life. The Agora today isn't just a market, it's a stage, an amphitheater, and a bar fight rolled into one. Soldiers bark out names, citizens shout about patriotism, philosophers mutter about the futility of violence, then casually step aside before getting trampled. You just try not to make eye contact with anyone holding a weapon. There's talk of conscription. That might sound democratic, but remember, you're not a citizen. You don't get conscripted. You get assigned. If your master volunteers or is called up, you're expected to follow, to carry weapons, cook food, dig latrines, patch sandals, and, if things go really south, row on a trireme for hours, sometimes days. Historians still argue whether slaves and servants were allowed on warships voluntarily or under duress. Some records suggest there were pay incentives. Others hint that volunteering was just code for you now live below deck. Let's talk about those ships. The trireme is a sleek, triple-decked galley powered by human backsides and sore arms. It's fast, deadly, and smells like fish stew mixed with sweat and broken dreams. You're not on one today, thank the gods, but you're expected to help prepare the gear, and that means hoisting anchors, fetching ropes, and pretending to understand naval strategy when someone asks you to secure the hypozomata. Meanwhile, war fever is climbing. And as it does, so do the city's plagues. You'd think open-air temples and sunny courtyards would keep Athens healthy. Nope. This is the era before germ theory. Sanitation is a vague idea involving dumping chamber pots into alleyways and hoping Apollo blesses the breeze. So when sick people start coughing into the marketplace, everyone panics. You're told to help move the sick to a separate chamber. It's just a corner room of someone's house that smells like garlic and despair. A man lies on a pallet, eyes red, breath rattling. You hold your breath, not that it helps, and try not to make noise as you collect soiled linens. And then, in the middle of all this death and panic, the theater opens. Because why not? Nothing pairs better with plague and war than a good tragedy. Your master, naturally, insists on attending. And guess what? You're going with him. Not as a guest, of course. You're there to carry the seat cushion and peel grapes. Theater in ancient Athens is a civic duty, a big event, with everyone from high officials to fishmongers in attendance. Plays are performed during festivals like the Dionysia, with prizes, processions, and masks the size of your face. The amphitheater is enormous, carved into the slope below the Acropolis. The stone seats are packed. The actors wear towering masks, project their lines like thunder, and stomp dramatically around the stage. And the content? Dark. Murder, betrayal, gods punishing hubris. One guy gouges his own eyes out. Another kills his daughter to win wind for a naval expedition. You're not sure if this is supposed to be entertaining or just cautionary therapy for an entire city on edge. There's a moment where the chorus sings of fate, inescapable, merciless, vast. You look up from the grape bowl you've been holding for 2 hours and suddenly feel very seen. Later, as the audience begins to file out, everyone discusses the meaning of the play. Your master says it's a warning about arrogance. His friend thinks it's about piety. The man behind you loudly insists it's an allegory for tax policy. You think it's about getting through the day without falling over. But the walk home brings something unexpected. Laughter. A group of actors, still half in costume, are chasing each other with wooden swords and singing bawdy songs about satyrs. People are smiling. Someone hands you a fig. You eat it without thinking. Sweet, warm, slightly bruised, but real food. And for a fleeting moment, you feel like maybe, just maybe, you're not entirely outside this strange, chaotic world. You saw the same play. You felt the same pang when the chorus sang of death. You even understood the joke about Poseidon's trident, though you wouldn't dare laugh out loud. The moment fades. A citizen tells you to mind your posture. Another accuses you of stepping on his cloak. You mutter an apology. The spell breaks. You're back to being nobody. You trudge the last few streets to the house, now quiet under a moonlit sky. Your feet are blistered. Your head hums with lines from the play. You wonder what tomorrow holds. Disease, philosophy, war, or worse, more barley. One of the neighbor's goats stares at you through a fence. You nod in solidarity. He gets it. You're asleep for maybe an hour when a crash jolts you upright. Someone's knocked over an amphora outside, or possibly thrown it. You can't tell anymore. The city never really sleeps. It just simmers. You lie back down, if that's the right word for sprawling across woven reeds on cold stone. Your entire body aches. And not just a little I-carried groceries ache. No, this is the deep, marrow-rattling fatigue of someone who's served food, dodged spears, inhaled plague breath, discussed metaphysics, and cleaned a temple all in the same 24-hour window. You try to shift positions, but you can't get comfortable. Your left arm itches, still recovering from that scrape in the latrines, and your right leg is cramping from the uneven ground. You try to stretch, but there's not enough space, not with 2 other household slaves sleeping beside you and a goat tied near the back door. But don't worry. There's no time to sleep in, because someone's emptying a chamber pot right above your head. You jerk upright just in time to avoid a splash of what might generously be called liquid experience. It hits the dirt beside you with a wet slap. You don't scream. You just close your eyes, sigh through your nose, and remind yourself that this, too, is apparently part of the divine order. And here's the thing. Chamber pots are the luxury option. The poor? They use ditches, or pots hurled from windows, or nothing at all. There's no plumbing, no sewage, just a series of habits and a hope that the gods enjoy the smell. You stumble up and decide to sneak a quick rinse. You creep into the corner courtyard where rainwater collects in a cracked cistern. The water's tepid, possibly mosquito-infested, but it's wet. You splash your face, wipe under your arms with a scrap of linen, and instantly feel 10% more human, just in time for lice inspection. Yes, that's a real thing. The mistress occasionally decides everyone in the household needs to be checked, especially after a theater night or temple duty. You line up, someone inspects your scalp with a stick. Someone else checks your tunic for crawlies. You fail. Congratulations. You're issued vinegar. Not to drink, unfortunately. To wash your hair. You sit cross-legged, head tilted, as someone slowly pours vinegar into your curls. It stings. It smells like defeat, and it doesn't even work all that well. You scratch absently, then stop when someone glares. You're dirtying the air. At this point, you'd give almost anything for a toothbrush. Too bad those don't exist yet. Not really. The Greeks do care about breath, but the options are limited. You might chew on twigs, rub your teeth with ashes, or just rely on wine to cover the rot. If your teeth hurt, that's probably a worm burrowing in there. Some healers will drill a hole to let it out. Others recommend spells. Historians still argue whether these practices came from early medicine or just old superstition. Either way, you're not letting anyone near your molars with a chisel today. You attempt to eat breakfast. Another sad lump of maza, slightly crustier this time, paired with stale onions and a fig so fermented it could file for wine status. You eat anyway, because your stomach doesn't care about flavor. It just wants to not fold in on itself. Then it's off to clean the street. Yes, the street. In ancient Athens, sanitation is a community effort. That means poor folks and enslaved people like you do the sweeping, the scooping, the dodging of waste, bones, broken pottery, and the occasional passed-out drunk philosopher. Today, you find all four. You sweep. You mutter to yourself. You find a crushed chicken foot and flick it into the alley. A neighbor opens a shutter and shouts that you missed a spot. You don't reply. You just bow stiffly and keep sweeping. And just when you're nearly done, it rains. Not a cleansing rain. Not a soft, poetic drizzle. This is a hot, sticky slap of humidity and dirt, turning the street into a smelly soup of runoff and regret. You stand there, wet, gritty, skin tingling from vinegar, lice possibly regrouping, and think, this might actually be worse than Spartan boot camp. You stumble back home, soaked and silent. The master is napping. The mistress is lecturing someone about figs. You sneak into a shadowy corner and sit down for just one moment. And then, finally, no one calls your name. No one shouts. No one orders. You breathe. And in that brief, quiet window, you realize something. You've survived the day. Barely. Battered, stinking, possibly infected, but alive. You're not sure you'll manage another. But for now, you rest. And now, as the last echoes of ancient footsteps fade, let your mind soften. The streets grow quieter. The heat lifts. The stone beneath you slowly cools. Even the goats, ever curious, have gone still. The city of Athens, so loud, so full of gods and politics and drama, sinks gently into shadow. You're not running anymore, not sweeping, not pouring wine. No one's asking you to define justice or scrub an altar. You're not dodging pot lids or philosophers or chamber pots. You're simply here, in this gentle hush, with your breath steady and your limbs heavy. Let your shoulders relax. Feel the coolness of the marble walls. Imagine the flicker of an oil lamp dimming to a soft glow. Maybe there's a quiet lyre playing somewhere, just a few notes, drifting like a lullaby across the courtyard. Even the lice, for once, are asleep. The gods have turned away for the night. The philosophers have stopped arguing. Even the fleas and fig sellers have gone silent. The world, chaotic as it is, has paused its spinning for you. Just a moment, just enough. Let your thoughts float like petals on a breeze, brief, drifting, already forgotten. You've walked through history's heat, its dust, its exhaustion, and now you're safe, you're still, you're free in this breath, this moment. Sleep well, time traveler.